Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. Today we're going to check out a couple of things that have caught my interest. One, what we're checking out now is a new single from Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. This came out a few days ago. It's called Salamander in Two Worlds. I don't remember how long it's been since we've had new music from this group, but it's been years. I don't remember how many. I want to say it's more than 10, but yeah, there's nothing in the description about it. Let's just dive straight into this and see what's going on with some Sleepytime Gorilla Museum.
Open your eyes, salamander, and breathe.
It's dancing around so many different styles.
A mother's voice into a world of water, stone, and softening.
It borrows a little bit from Renaissance era classical. It also has some modern soundtrack work to it. There's prog psychedelia.
On the dark, wet food of literature.
I love the vocal harmonies. There's at least three voices going on right here.
Then the rain burned, and father learned to cry,
Slight accelerando going on.
and we in the gardens of our enemies learn to die, or learn to hide our losses in the evergreen.
So it feels like we are doing 4-bar phrases in 3/4. Starting to build up a lot of intensity right here. I love that drum idea. Totally melodic. Still working with this 3 pulse. Four, 5 voices there. I think this is one that's going to take a few listens to really get. I can see the visage of cohesion but there's a lot that doesn't make much sense to me yet. Oh, I love that drumming.
Open your eyes, Salamander, and
Some weird looping stuff off to the edges in that last section. Just such a good drum pattern. Nice bass tone here as well. Really interesting harmony there. I hadn't realized that. Okay. Huh. It's always real tough to dissect Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. They're an eclectic bunch, and this song does not disappoint in the slightest. It is nothing of what I expected, and thus everything that I expected from them. Let's dive into what they did. The way I've compartmentalized the song is primarily in three sections. We have our spacious avant-garde style at the beginning that later gives way to a larger symphonic concept that later evolves into a full rock slash avant-garde metal thing towards the end, and then also bounces around between these three styles structurally. They all sort of do the same thing though. It's really interesting to see them not utilize the different instrumentation types for different purposes. Everything here is done to, I don't want to say unsettle the listener, but certainly make them a little weak in the legs, make it so that they have difficulty standing on solid ground while listening to it. All of it is done with the purpose, I think, of being a bit odd, eclectic. I'm not sure to what end, though. I didn't really pick up any narrative story or artistic purpose for the eccentricities on display here, but at least to me, that was my experience throughout most of this was I kind of see what they're doing, but it's also just odd enough that I can't really, plant my 2 feet and say, I get this. I'm with you here. I always feel a bit off balanced. A lot of this comes from their use of time signature. They utilize a 3/4 throughout all of the track, and it works with 4-bar phrases of it, which is fairly typical, but they also play around with ideas outside of the main instruments. The chord progression and the melodies exist within this 12-beat idea, 4 bars of 3 beats. but there are ideas that sit on the periphery that don't. I'm not sure if I can accurately call them polymetric yet. I would have to give it another listen. But at this point, they are playing around with, if nothing else, rhythmic accentuation patterns that betray, at least in moments, the typical phrasing that our lead instruments provide. It creates a difficulty in trying to get a grasp on the flow of the song. There are many sections while I was conducting in my head and counting out the beats, it still never quite felt right. I never quite had a full understanding of what was happening rhythmically. I think when you pair this with some of the melodic ideas going on in here as well, this really begins to accumulate the feeling of uneasiness. Again, that's not the word I want, but it's just a lack of stability, really. The melodies are sort of odd as well. Um, they don't go anywhere, which is an interesting idea to begin with, but it's also rhythmically odd. The vocal lines tend to end up in places that don't feel resolved, and they begin their next phrase completely ignoring the last. The rhythms are sort of their own thing, once again, betraying what the rest of the band is presenting often. Again, I'm not sure if I should call this polymetric yet. It could just be polyrhythmic. But regardless, there's a lot of different rhythmic ideas going on. And when you pair that with the vocals and their vocal melodies, not really going anywhere, not really resolving places, just sort of being, it's just really difficult to come out of this after a single listen and say, ah, I get this. I see what's going on here. Because honestly, I don't. What I find most fascinating about this isn't just that this is how they decided to go about doing this. They could have easily done this with the introduction segment where we had the auxiliary percussion, the glockenspiel giving us our bell sound in the background. We had the flute, maybe a tin whistle, providing some ornamental ideas, the two vocals giving us our lead melody. Yeah, just an eclectic group of instruments playing things eclectically. But once we bring in the brass and the strings, you'd think that they would find more solidified foundation, and they decide not to. By the time that we bring in the electric guitar, electric bass, and drums, and the harsher vocals, just the wider vocals in general, having 5 vocalists by the end, they've had multiple opportunities to refine down what they're doing, and they choose not to. By this point, even, it's quite clear where our polyrhythmic ideas are coming from. We have groupings of 3, groupings of 4, and groupings of 2 all happening all over the place. It seems like they all wrap up by beat 12 and restart on beat 1. I don't think it's polymetric. However, what they do within the 12-beat phrase, or maybe in 24 beats, if maybe we look at a double phrasing, there's a lot of areas where different groups of instruments are emphasizing different beats at different times than other instruments, and all these different placed accents creates a sort of hocket within itself, but it's a confusing hocket because nothing's really lining up together. It basically creates another layer of music on top of the chaos that's already being created. I enjoyed my time listening to this, despite being flummoxed at every corner. It's a great word, by the way, look it up. Uh, And it's one of those rare cases where I would listen to something, basically have a confused look on my face most of the time, giggle the other half of the time, and walk away from it thinking, yeah, I'd like some more of that. Confusion can be good. It can also be bad. I've listened to some stuff that just completely eludes me, and I did not like the way it sounded, or did not like the mystery it left behind. And haven't listened to those again. But this, it's enticing. It's just on the border between more traditional music and obviously avant-garde experimental stuff. And so there's plenty here that works on a more palatable level, even if there's a lot of ideas here that are going to confuse most listeners. Or some of the more palatable ideas, I think, pop up more towards the end, but there are some ideas in our non-rock and metal sections that I think some people would enjoy. The overall light and spacious feeling that we have in the beginning between the flute and the uh, glockenspiel. We had one string here, didn't we? I can't remember. And the two vocals. It's just a very spacious, sort of whimsical feeling. It has sort of a soundtrack vibe to it around here. I think people could easily get sucked up into this and begin to have a story play out in their head, no different than listening to soundtrack music in general, or more specifically, and begin to have something develop to go alongside the music. By the time we bring in the horns, we definitely have something a bit more traditional to listen to here. It goes for a bit of bombast. The vocals continue to take the lead. We have a little bit more rigidity in structure here, though the brass do introduce a new level of rhythm. By the time that the rock and metal come in, I think most rock and metal listeners are going to find something here that is palatable in some way, particularly even if they're used to more eclectic writings, if they listen to progressive rock or metal. The sounds in general, the rhythms utilized, the drum work. Drum work is so good. The guitar work. We have riffs in here that aren't that far out of place with some other progressive metal groups. It really is everything coming together that creates the cluster, the confusion, the chaos. But when you look at individual elements, I think people could find stuff to enjoy in this very easily. And that's where I'm talking about finding that meeting point. It's not that this is completely avant-garde. If you isolate specific lines, I think you'll find they're rather tame, boring, maybe even. It's when you bring them all together, and I think that's what separates them from other avant-garde acts, is that they do have a very on the surface understandable normalcy to everything. But you just have to look a little closer, and I think some people could do that rather easily. It's when you take the song in as a whole that it begins to get overwhelming and confusing, and you're trying to figure out what it all means. And that probably helps with me as well. I'm not usually a huge avant-garde fan. It needs to toe a line closer to traditional writing in order for me to enjoy the more experimental ideas. And that's exactly what Sleepytime Gorilla Museum has done here. I haven't checked out any of their albums prior. We have had them on the channel once or twice. I think once was a live stream. I know we did a full reaction to one song a long time ago. If this is a single off of a future album, pre-order your CD and vinyl here. Sleepytime Gorilla Museum, arguably the most uncategorizable band in America. Looking forward to bring back the Apocalypse with their fourth studio album of The Last Human Being. So yes, they also have a hashtag SGM 2024. So it looks like this will come out next year. I would not be surprised if you find this on my AOTY list next year, because they do walk this line rather well. I do want to give a quick little shout out to the drum work in here, which is just phenomenal. I am a huge fan of melodic drums. I've said this in the past. If you've listened to some of my earlier attempts to write rock music, you'll find that the drums in there are quite a bit eclectic for the music that they're paired with. I write my drums melodically. I've learned to do more of a percussive rhythmic thing with them over the years. I don't think it's particularly strong, but I have learned how to write them a bit more rhythmic. But this, just pure melodic drumming, is right up my alley. Every beat is a group of 4 notes on a different instrument. 4 quick hits on the snare, 4 quick hits on a tom, 4 quick bass kicks, 4 quick hits on another snare, or another tom, sorry. And they just change it up constantly, and it feels like it's a melody line more so than a rhythm. Of course, they're still giving us the emphasized beat. The first note of every group is still emphasized, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel traditional. It doesn't feel like it's there as a metronome first and maybe something else second. This is to add to the music first and keep the time second or even third, maybe. It feels like it is just as important to the main storytelling here as any other instrument, and it's not a part of the foundation or the rhythm section. It's a lead instrument, part of this multi-layered, hocketed, whatever they're doing. And I absolutely love that approach to percussion writing. I'm going to take a second here to read the lyrics. I caught a few glimpses of them during the video since it was a lyric video, but not enough to piece anything together. So I'm going to read them complete right now and see what I can make out of it, if anything. All right. So there's a metaphor in here, but I'm not quite sure what it is. It begins and says, "Open your eyes, Salamander, and breathe, called by my mother's voice into a world of water, stone, and softening wood." Right here at the beginning, we have a newborn salamander. I do believe that this is supposed to be a metaphor for humanity, but I'm not quite sure yet. I want to skip the second stanza and move to the third. No, it doesn't work. The stanzas here are repeated quite a bit. They are sort of slowly delivered, so it feels like there's a lot of words, but honestly, there's a whole 12 lines in this track. They're just repeated often and quite spacious in their delivery. So after being born, it says, "Growing strong on the dark, wet food of literature and leaves. Then the rain burned and father learned to cry, and we in the gardens of our enemies learn to die or learn to hide our losses. In the ever gray of morning, eating poison. Strong from poison, alive in the arms of death, last of the salamanders, child of the first breath, salamander in 2 worlds, water and fire. Open your eyes, salamander, and breathe." So being born into a world that is nice, filled with water, stone, your mother's voice, and the softening of wood. We grew up. Literature and leaves. We learned about the world. We satisfied our mind. We satisfied our bodies. But then, bad stuff happened. On the literal level, it says the rain burned. Father learned to cry. I really like that line. I think it speaks about more of a stereotypical male parent figure who might be a bit more stoic and never allows their family to see them cry. And at this moment, the child does, the first time ever. And it's not that he chose to cry now. Father learned to cry here. I think that's a really cool way to go about it, especially coming off of the previous line where he nurtured his mind. We fed on literature. Everything about childhood is learning. It says, in the gardens of our enemies, we learn to die or to hide our losses and eat poison. So we learned how to live in a not great environment. But because we did that, we became hardened and grew. Now, this last line I think is really interesting. Salamander in two worlds, water and fire. Of course, born in water. I'm not sure where the fire part comes in, though. I know in folklore, salamanders are often compared to or have a fire attunement to them and stuff like this. Um, and they're born in water or near water. I know they're water reptiles. Someone more knowledgeable can clue me in on that, but I'm not sure where or sorry, what this idea of being of two worlds, water and fire, is supposed to mean. Of course, we have the childhood and we have the modern day adulthood. The simplicity and joys of childhood with the negativity and realities that we learn in adulthood. We must be of both worlds. That's the metaphor I'm taking out of this. To never lose that childhood spark, to want everything to be a learning scenario, to expand your mind every day, but also to understand the realities of life and the darkness it can be, and the lack of joy that life can also be. Striving as you might, consuming poison every day in order to stay alive. I think it's a really interesting set of lyrics. Even if I don't fully understand everything about them, I think I get the gist of it enough to appreciate it. It does make me wonder what's going on with the music then. I don't really see the music operating in two worlds. In fact, I see three. But that might not be intentional either. That's just how I categorized it so I could remember it and bring it up later. I don't know. Let me know y'all's thoughts on Salamander in Two Worlds by Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. These are just mine. Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Any topics or reads that you might want to add on to what I stated? Maybe you have your own opinion or perspective on things. Put all that stuff down in the description box. Above that, in the put all that down in the comment section. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have one more video coming up today. It will not be a new song, but it is something that's caught my ear and I'd like to explore a little bit further into. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.